David Livingstone was a Scottish medical missionary, explorer, and abolitionist who spent much of his life exploring the African continent. He was born on March 19, 1813 in Blantyre, Scotland, to a family that was poor but deeply religious. His father was a devout Presbyterian who instilled in him a strong sense of duty and compassion for others. Livingstone had to work in a cotton factory from a young age to support his family, but he was determined to get an education. He attended school in the evenings and was eventually accepted to study medicine and theology at the University of Glasgow. He completed his studies in 1840 and became a medical missionary with the London Missionary Society. Livingstone's first posting was to South Africa, where he worked with the Tswana people in what is now Botswana. He was deeply affected by the poverty and suffering he saw there, as well as the brutality of the slave trade. He became an outspoken opponent of slavery and dedicated himself to the task of ending it in Africa. In 1849, Livingstone set on his first major expedition, to which was to explore the Zambezi River and its surroundings. He discovered the magnificent Victoria Falls, which he named for Queen Victoria, and continued on to explore the upper reaches of the river. He also mapped the geography and natural resources of the region and collected specimens for scientific study. Livingstone's next major expedition was to cross the continent from west to east, which he accomplished between 1852 and 1856. The journey was grueling, and Livingstone and his companions faced many hardships, including illness, hunger, and attacks from hostile tribes. Nevertheless, Livingstone continued to map the terrain and document the region. Livingstone's expeditions brought him to international fame and made him a hero in his home country of Scotland. He used his celebrity status to raise awareness for the plight of the African people and to advocate for their rights. He also continued to work as a medical missionary, treating the sick and injured wherever he went. In 1866, Livingstone set out what would be his last expedition, which was to find the source of the Nile River. He was accompanied by a team of porters and assistants, but as soon as they became separated from him in the dense jungle, Livingstone continued on alone, suffering from illness and starvation, and was eventually found by the American journalist Henry Morton Stanley in 1871. Livingstone's health was severely compromised by his long years of exploration, and he died in 1873 in what is now Zambia. His body was returned to Britain and buried in Westminster Abbey, where he is still honored as one of the greatest explorers and humanitarians of his time. Livingstone's legacy continues to inspire people all around the world, and he is remembered as a brave, compassionate man who has devoted his life to exploring the unknown and helping others. His writings and discoveries helped open up Africa to commerce and Christianity, and his advocacy against the slave trade helped bring it to an end.
David Livingstone's impact on missions can be seen in a number of ways. Firstly, his explorations of the African interior opened up vast new territories for missionary work, and he was instrumental in establishing new mission stations and churches throughout the region. Secondly, David Livingstone's emphasis on practical skills and education helped to break down the cultural boundaries between missionaries and local people, making it easier for them to work together and share knowledge. Thirdly, Livingstone's writings and lectures about his experiences in Africa helped to raise awareness of the continent and its peoples, and to challenge prevailing attitudes of ignorance and prejudice. Finally, Livingstone's example as a devoted Christian who was willing to endure great hardships and even risk his life for the sake of his mission inspired many others to follow in his footsteps. Overall, Livingstone's impact on missions was profound, and his legacy continues to influence the work of missionaries and Christian organizations around the world today.
Some fun facts about David Livingstone is that being a missionary in Africa was actually his second plan. He initially hoped to go to China as a missionary, but when the First Opium War broke out in September of 1839, Livingstone focused his ambitions on Africa instead. Dr. Livingstone ensured that he would not be seen as a threat from the African tribes by traveling lightly with only a few servants and porters, bartering for supplies along the way. David Livingstone moved to Africa in 1841 as a medical missionary. However, he believed his spiritual calling lay in exploration rather than preaching. In fact, his heart is actually buried in Africa, where his remains are buried in London.